facing the furnace. I don't know if you've ever had to face the furnace in your life, if you've ever had to feel the heat of the fire. Daniel chapter 3, and we're going to do a little bit of reading this morning, so follow with me. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth was 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, and the counselors, and the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, that you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace." Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore, at the time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Then King Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought, and so they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall be immediately cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" I realize that there are times in life when mountains stand in our way. And these mountains say, "Who is the God that will deliver you out of my hands?" You see, Babylon represented more than just a city or an empire. Babylon was God's name for Satan's system in this world. We see that Babylon we see in the Bible, Babylon started in Genesis chapter 10 by Nimrod. And so Babylon represents rebellion against God. So it's no wonder that the king of Babylon comes and tries to get everyone to forget about who Jehovah is and fall and worship him instead. You see, The whole Babylonian system was Satan's counterfeit, opposing God's truth and seeking to capture the hearts, the minds, and the bodies of all of its citizens. But yet the king's command is determined to cancel their personality and change their posture and hijack their purpose. You know, when mountains come before you, the mountain seeks to get you to change your posture. The mountain wants you to bow to the mountain instead of bowing before your God. The mountain wants to consume your mind, consume your thoughts. The mountain wants to flood you with anxiousness, with thoughts of defeat, with hurt. It tries to change your posture towards itself. The mountain says to you, who is this God that will deliver you out of my hands? And so they stood before a furnace, this room that was heated to high temperatures to create different material, and it was meant, and it was a symbolic use of hell. So what Nebuchadnezzar was really saying is that, listen, you fall down and you worship me, or I will send you to hell myself. Nebuchadnezzar wanted to take the shape and take the place of God in their life. There are situations that come into our life that try to replace who God is in our life. There are situations that come across our way to distract us from the purpose that God has put us here on earth to accomplish. This is what happened to David at Ziklag. David returns to Ziklag with his men. And it says that the Amalekites came in and burned Ziklag down and took everything, including their wives and their children and everything that they had. And so David now is facing these 600 men that he fought alongside with. These men that had his loyalty. All of a sudden they start to turn against him, and they say, you know what? Maybe we should kill David. David is facing his own furnace moment. Even David's own wives have been taken by the Amalekites. What is he supposed to do? The Bible says in 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 6, an incredible statement about David. It says that, but David strengthened himself in the Lord. That David strengthened himself in the Lord. Let me tell you, whatever is falling apart in your life right now is the devil's attempt to derail God's given purpose for your life. If you did not know it, let me be the one to tell you this morning that God has a purpose and a plan and a destiny for your life. You were not put on this earth by chance. God has called you to great things. And so this was to derail David from getting to his Jerusalem, to taking his throne that God had called him to sit on. Not man. God called him to sit on the throne. God anointed him to sit on the throne. And so this episode at Ziklag came to remove him from his God-given plan and destiny. But David strengthened himself in the Lord. David remembered God's goodness along the way. David remembered when he stood before a giant and all he had was a sling and 5 stones, and that first stone hit that giant in the one spot that took that man down. When no one else would stand up to him, little David was the one. And he remembered God's goodness and God's faithfulness in that time. And all the times that he faced the lions and he faced bears and he had to protect his father's sheep, he remembered the goodness of his God. Church, can I remind you of the goodness of your God? Can you look back and see the goodness of your God? Come on, balcony. I'm glad that you're with me this morning. And so, this is why David said in Psalm 77, I shall remember the deeds of the Lord. I will certainly remember your wonders of old. I will meditate on all your work and your deeds with thanksgiving. You see, concentrating on the goodness and the faithfulness of God does not make God bigger, because God cannot be improved. You cannot improve who God is in your life, but what you can do is change your perspective of who God is. What you can do is when you fix your eyes on Jesus and you remember the times that He stepped in to provide and to protect for you and to deliver you from the hands of Babylon, from the hands of the enemy, and you see God as you have never seen your God before. It changes your perspective because you can't change the size of God. But you can change the size of your problem. You can change the size of your mountain. This is what worship does. Worship focuses our eyes back to Jesus. Worship changes my perspective to say, hey, this is going on, but this is my God. And sometimes we need to introduce our problems to our God. You see, these three Hebrew men realized that life could only have meaning if they opposed this degrading idolatry that Nebuchadnezzar was trying to impose on them. Even if that meant they had to face the furnace, it didn't matter to them. Because who their God was far more important than what Nebuchadnezzar could ever do to them. Who my God is far more important than whatever the mountain that stands in my way is trying to do to me. So if that means I have to walk through the furnace, then let it be. I don't know if there's anybody here with me that would say, give me the furnace because I want Jesus. Let's keep reading. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And He will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Wow. What kind of faith does it take to look the king in the eye and say, I don't owe you an answer to anything? What does it take to look at your mountain, to look at the situation that's challenging you, that's daring you, that is defying the God you serve, and say, I don't owe you a thing? Because the God that I serve is able. The God that I serve, we sang this morning, is bigger, stronger. I don't owe you a thing, king. But then they make this statement. And they say, but if not. You ever thought about that? But if not, they started off with this statement of faith, declaring that they don't know the king a thing, but then they make the statement, but if not. It made me wonder, what did they mean by but if not? Was this a statement of doubt? Was this, some kind of disclaimer that would give God an out if God did not choose to bring them out of the furnace? Was it some kind of escape hatch to save God some embarrassment? What exactly does but if not mean? See, this was by no means a statement of doubt or disclaimer if this didn't work out. But if not is a demonstration of firm and unflinching resolve to serve their God. But if not was the equivalent of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego saying, King, you don't need to know our commitment to God. It's not based on anything that our God has done for us. Our commitment to God is based on who our God is. My commitment to God is not based on whether God blesses me today or tomorrow or does anything from my commitment to God is based that He loved me enough to go die on a cross for my sin and shed His blood on Calvary's cross. So what I do is that I surrender all. You see, He is able and we believe that He'll deliver us. But if not, you must know that we're not going to bow. I am not going to bow to the situations that come before me. I am not going to bow to Satan's attack. That's why in Ephesians chapter 6 it says, stand. Having done all to stand, stand. I am not going to bow down to the things of this world. And that's what I want to tell my mountains this morning. I don't know if there's anyone here this morning that's ready to take a stand against the situations in their life. I don't know if you're going through something, if you're facing down sickness, if you're facing down some other matters that have knocked you off your feet. But I'm telling you, church, it is time to stand and stand firm and with unflinching resolve on who your God is. It is better to be in the grace of God than in the favor of man. But if not, see, it's believed that when grace is given to a person or group of people, it infused them with unusual abilities. That a touch of grace enabled someone to do what they could normally not do. And so, when we read about grace in the Bible, it's referring to a supernatural impartation from God that He graciously gives to enable, empower, and strengthen us. I believe that these three Hebrew boys, when they stood before Nebuchadnezzar, they were imparted with God's grace. And the more I get older, the more I go through situations in life, the more I realize that I need God's grace. I can't live without God's grace. Max Lucado says that grace is the voice that calls us to change and then gives us the power to pull it off. Grace is the power that calls us to change and the power to pull it off. I need God's grace. So when we talk about facing your furnace, we're talking about a grace that God has set for us that gives us a supernatural ability that allows us to navigate extremely difficult circumstances and situations in life. But if not, it means that God has given me the grace to stand up in any situation and face any mountain and face any devil that may stand in my way to stop me from reaching my God-given purpose. God has supplied me with the grace that I need to accomplish His purpose. He's empowered me. Church, He's empowered you. He's given you His Spirit. In a few weeks, we're going to celebrate Easter. I love Easter because you know what it means? It reminds me that my Jesus didn't just go into the grave. He came out of the grave. And it reminds me that because He came out of the grave, He left me with the same power that took Him out of the grave. So when I'm faced with the grave, I don't need to worry because my God defeated the grave. My God defeated sin. My God defeated death. So why should I worry? Why should I complain? When the mountain tries to get me to bow, why should I give in? What shall we say about such wonderful things as this? If God is for us, who can ever be against us? Come on, church. Somebody needs to remind themselves of that. Who can be against you if God is for you? God's grace says that indeed, if God is for us, then we don't need to fear what man can do to us. We don't need to fear what the furnace will do to us. Let him do its worst. God will deliver us either from death or in death. I think about what Paul says when he says to live is Christ, but to die is gain. To live is Christ, but to die is gain. I think standing before Nebuchadnezzar, they knew who Nebuchadnezzar was. They knew his character. They knew that if he said he was going to throw them into the fire, that he was going to throw them into the fire. They knew that. They could have easily said, you know what? If he wants us to bow down, all right, maybe we could just bow down, but we won't worship in our own mind and our own thought. You know, we won't do this. We'll just give the physical appearance that we're doing it and try to fake it just to save our lives, and fool the king. They could have done that. They could have. But the faith that rose up in them said, no. No, my God deserves better than me just giving in and to appease man. Who is man compared to my God? And so I believe that they lived out their salvation because they realized that when you know who is behind you, the fear of what's in front of you disappears. When you know that the Lion of Judah stands behind you, then the fear of whatever's in front of me disappears. And it says that Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments. And they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace because the king's order was so urgent and the furnace overheated. The flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the fiery furnace. And then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste, and he declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast three men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." And he answered and said, "But I see four men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the fourth is like the son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace and declared, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. And the satraps and the prefects and the governors and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of these men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of the fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trust in him, and set aside the king's command, and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree: any people, any nation, or language that speaks against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God. There is no other God. Church, there is no other God who can rescue in this way." And then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. The king left us with a question: "And which God will deliver you out of my hands?" And now, he himself is forced to recognize the one true living God. You see, fire is what it does. It burns, it stings, it singes, it scorches, and all of these characteristics of fire are visible proof that fire is here. There's another proof that fire is present, and that is the smell of smoke. Most of you have all smoke detectors in your house, right? To alert you of the presence of fire. You know, I love barbecue. And as soon as it's hot enough, I love that, you get some good steaks on there, some good barbecue chicken. Oh man, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. But what I hate is that when you've got too much of that heat and then you step away from the grill and you smell that smoke all in your hair and all over your clothes and everything, right? Because once that smoke is there, it binds to you. That's why I just have my brother cook and I eat. Well, if he chooses to. But we need to face the fact that Satan's fiery attacks are intended to take us out of the game. At very least, it's meant to leave the terrible smell of that smoke on our life. The fire is meant to leave us with long-lasting scars, with burns, with the smell of smoke on our life. But the only way to overcome that is for the fourth man to show up in the midst of our problem. The only way to resolve that is for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to supernaturally come and visit us in the midst of our problems. I realized something that I never saw before in this story. It said that 3 men went into the fire bound. But yet the king saw 4 men unbound. Think about that. 3 men went in unbound, bound, but 4 men showed up unbound. And they went in fully dressed in all their clothes. And then the Bible says that they came out. They weren't even singed, scorched. They didn't even have the evidence of smoke. It's like they went into this thing and there wasn't even any fire. And not only that, I'm reading this and I'm saying, well, these guys go in bound, fully dressed. They come out seemingly unharmed, but yet the men who were taking them in died instantly. You know, some of you go through some stuff that people look at you and say, I don't know how you handle those situations. Some of you have gone through some really messed up situations, but you came through it. You're here today, aren't you? And what happened? Because when God showed up and we cooperate with His work in our lives, He takes away the evidence of the fire and even the smell of smoke. They had confidence in who their God was. See, it's one thing to have a general conviction about God's power, but it's another thing to believe that He can completely defy the laws of nature. That He can do the impossible. And not even do the impossible, but do it in such a grand, spectacular way. See, they were ready to glorify God in life or death. It didn't matter to them. It didn't matter to them. See, faith means trusting in God and His Word. But faith doesn't mean that we know or understand His specific purpose for us. It may mean that we have to follow Him, whatever His purpose is, even if it means following into the furnace. Their faith did not hold strong by accident. Their faith held strong because of what they've been through their entire life. See, as they look back on their life and they remember the time, I look back and I see the time that God healed me. I look back and I see the time that I was faced with an impossible situation and God got me through it. You look back and you think of the time that God may have healed someone from cancer and they're still standing. That God brought people back from heart attacks and heart failure and they're still standing. That God brought people that had one foot in the grave and yet they're still here. I can look back and see that God has been good to me all my life. He may not have done it the way I would have wanted him to do it, but he still did it. He may not have done it in the time I wanted him to do it, but he still did it. He may not have spared me the furnace, but he showed up in it with me. See, I believe that this was their Genesis 50:20 moment. I don't know if you're familiar with Genesis 50:20, but that was the end of the story of Joseph. Right? Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers, and then went to Potiphar's house, then went to prison, and then rose to the palace. And then his brothers at the end of his father's life come and say, hey, they were worried that he was going to retaliate against them now. But Joseph says something remarkable in Genesis 50:20. And I believe that at this moment of their life, this was their Genesis 50:20 moment, that what the devil meant for evil, God will turn for good. But don't forget the next part, so that many might be saved. Let me tell you something, church. We go through situations as children of God. We go through things, but they're not just by accident. Because some of the things that we go through, other people could never handle them. Look at what happened to those men who threw these guys into the furnace, right? The furnace took them out immediately, but yet these men went in. Some of the things you go through, maybe I couldn't go through it, but God has called you through it. God has called you to walk this path because God has a plan for your life. Church, don't ever let your worry be louder than your worship. Do not ever let your anxiety be louder than your worship to God. Remember I said, 3 men went in bound, but 4 men were seen unbound. Let me give you my theory on what Nebuchadnezzar saw. If 4 men went in bound, but he saw if 3 men went in bound, but he saw 4 men unbound, I believe he saw 3 men with their hands lifted in the air because the God that they served was standing behind them. And they knew that my God was with me, so then I could look at the king and say that the fear of you disappears because my God is with me. So they were in there. They were worshiping their God. And so Nebuchadnezzar saw 4 men in there with 3 of them with their hands lifted high. And then he brought them out and realized that they did not even have the smell of smoke on their clothes. Let me tell you something. Worship may not change the circumstance you're in, but it sure will change your perspective. It will sure change your perspective because worship will sustain you in the furnace. When you stand before a mountain, when you stand before a situation, worship will get you through it. Because worship will change your perspective. Because remember, what looks like a giant to me, what towers over me, when my perspective shifts to God, this mountain is a little hill in the dirt for my God. And so, who is this God that will deliver you out of my hands? But come, mountain, let me tell you who this God is. And so this morning, church, this morning, I want to leave you with one thing. I want to leave you with one thing that I realize that has stood the test of time with God in my life. Isaiah 43 says, "But now, thus says the Lord, He who created you, O Jacob, He who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name, and you are mine. And when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. And when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you." Somebody needs to get up on their feet and worship the God that they serve this morning. That the promise is written plainly before you in the Word of God.